For decades, the middle class was supposed to be the safest place in society. If you worked full-time, saved responsibly, and followed the rules, life would slowly get better. You might not become rich, but you would be secure. You could afford a home, raise a family, take a vacation once a year, and retire without fear. That was the deal. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't exciting, but it was stable. And for a long time, it worked. Today, that promise feels broken. People are more educated than ever. They work longer hours, they're more productive, more adaptable, and more connected than any generation before them. And yet, many feel permanently stuck. Not poor enough to qualify for help, not wealthy enough to feel safe. One unexpected expense away from falling backward. This isn't just frustration, and it isn't personal failure. It's structural. So what actually happened to the middle class? There's a specific kind of frustration that defines the modern middle class. It's the feeling of doing everything right and still losing ground. You went to school, you got the degree, you found stable work, you avoided obvious mistakes. And yet, instead of feeling more secure each year, you feel like you're standing on thinner ice. This isn't the stress of poverty, it's something quieter. It's the stress of knowing that your life looks fine, but could unravel quickly. A single layoff, a medical bill, a rent increase, an interest rate change. The middle class used to be protected from shocks like this. Today, it absorbs them. Ask people how they're doing financially, and many will say they're fine. They have a job, they pay their bills, they're not starving. But ask a second question and the answer changes. Do you feel secure? Do you feel confident about the next 10 years? Do you feel like your life is getting easier? That's where the hesitation starts. People delay buying homes, they delay having children, they delay career risks, they delay life. This isn't because people suddenly became lazy or pessimistic. It's because the margin for error disappeared. Being poor is about not having enough. Being middle class today is about having something to lose and knowing how easily you could lose it. The middle class didn't become poor, it became fragile. The usual explanations are familiar. We're told globalization sent jobs overseas. Automation replaced workers with machines. Technology moved too fast. Competition increased. Skills didn't keep up. These explanations sound reasonable. And they're not entirely wrong, but they don't explain something more important. They don't explain why the middle class didn't just shrink, it lost stability. They don't explain why people who did everything they were told to do still feel like they're running in place. To understand that, we have to stop focusing on individuals and start looking at how the system itself changed. Because the middle class didn't disappear overnight. It was slowly redesigned. For much of the 20th century, the economy worked on a simple relationship. When productivity increased, wages increased. As workers produced more value, they earned more income. As income rose, spending increased. As spending increased, businesses expanded. This feedback loop built the modern middle class. It wasn't perfect, but it was predictable. If you stayed employed, gained experience, and worked consistently, your life improved over time. That predictability mattered more than people realize. It allowed families to commit to 30-year mortgages. It allowed parents to raise children without constant anxiety. It allowed people to plan decades ahead. Most importantly, it allowed people to believe that tomorrow would be better than today. That belief is what made the middle class possible. Over time, that relationship broke. Productivity kept rising. Workers produced more per hour than ever before. Technology improved efficiency. Global output expanded, but wages stopped rising with it. At first, the gap was small, easy to ignore. Then it widened. Instead of flowing to labor, the rewards of growth began flowing somewhere else. Not to work, but to ownership. Capital means ownership. Assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, intellectual property. Income from capital began growing faster than income from work. At first, this didn't feel like a problem. Markets were booming, pension funds were growing, home values were rising. People were told this meant everyone was winning. But ownership concentrates, and returns compound. The economy quietly shifted from rewarding participation to rewarding possession. What you owned began to matter more than what you did. This matters because the middle class depends on wages. Most middle class households don't live off investments. They exchange time, energy, and skill for income. So when wages stop keeping up, and even slowly, stability erodes. Not dramatically, not all at once. Quietly, people still have jobs, they still get promotions, and they still receive raises, but those raises no longer buy the same life. Rent rises faster. Housing drifts further out of reach. Healthcare eats into savings. Education becomes a recurring expense. The middle class didn't collapse, it stalled. To see how much changed, imagine 2 monthly budgets, one from the past, one from today. Decades ago, housing consumed a smaller share of income. Healthcare was predictable. Education was often optional or affordable. Saving wasn't heroic. It was normal. Today, housing alone can consume half a paycheck. Healthcare is uncertain. Education is financed before income even exists. What used to be discretionary became mandatory. The same income no longer buys the same stability. Not because people became irresponsible, but because the baseline cost of participation rose. This is where the difference becomes obvious. Your parents didn't work harder than you. They didn't make better choices. They entered the system earlier. At 25, many could afford rent and still save. At 30, buying a home was realistic. At 35, debt was manageable and shrinking. Today, these same milestones require higher income, more debt, and less flexibility. Two people can make the same effort, earn similar salaries, and end up in completely different positions depending on when they entered the system. The difference isn't discipline, it's timing. At the same time, another shift was happening. Asset prices began rising much faster than everyday incomes. Housing became more expensive, stocks surged, education costs climbed, healthcare costs increased, not because people suddenly became richer, but because credit became cheaper. Lower interest rates changed everything. When borrowing is cheaper, people can afford higher prices. When people can afford higher prices, prices rise. And once prices rise, they rarely come back down. Owning a home used to be the foundation of middle-class life. It provided shelter, stability, and long-term security. It also acted as forced savings. But as housing prices rose faster than wages, that foundation cracked. Those who already owned homes benefited from appreciation. Those who didn't were pushed further away. Saving became harder, buying became harder, debt became unavoidable. There's another change people rarely talk about. Jobs themselves changed. Employment used to absorb risk. Companies offered stability, benefits cushioned uncertainty, pensions smoothed market volatility. Today, much of that risk has shifted. Individuals absorb it. Job security is weaker, benefits are thinner. Retirement depends on markets. Employment no longer guarantees safety, and it only delays risk. This shift reveals something important. Risk didn't disappear, it moved. The middle class didn't just lose income growth, it inherited uncertainty. The middle class wasn't just squeezed, it was leveraged. More debt, less margin for error. Mortgages grew larger, student loans became unavoidable, credit cards filled the gaps. Debt didn't feel reckless, it felt necessary. And for a while it worked. From inside the system, this arrangement made sense. Rising asset prices strengthened balance sheets. Debt expansion kept consumption alive. Financial markets grew larger and more influential. The system avoided collapse, but stability came with trade-offs. When households are heavily leveraged, they become cautious. Job changes feel risky. Entrepreneurship feels dangerous. Career experiments feel irresponsible. People choose safety over opportunity, not because they lack ambition, but because mistakes are more expensive now. This is also why the system persists. From a government perspective, rising asset prices look like growth. From a market perspective, leveraged consumers look stable. From an institution's perspective, debt smooths volatility. The system isn't broken, it's optimized, just not for wage earners. Changing it would mean accepting short-term instability in exchange for long-term balance. That's a hard political choice. So the system continues, quietly shifting pressure downward. This is why the middle class feels invisible. Income alone no longer tells the story. Net worth does. Two people earning the same salary can face completely different futures. One has assets working for them, the other doesn't. One feels resilient, the other feels anxious. Importantly, this outcome doesn't require bad intentions. No single decision caused it. Single group planned it. It emerged from incentives, policies designed to prevent crises, financial systems designed to maintain stability, markets designed to reward efficiency and scale. From inside the system, the outcome is rational. From outside it, it feels unfair. The middle class wasn't erased, it was hollowed out. The label remained, the security did not. And once an economy shifts from rewarding participation to rewarding ownership, the effects compound. Those with assets gain influence. Policies protect asset values. Rising costs are treated as unavoidable. Meanwhile, wages remain constrained. So when people ask, where did the middle class go? The answer isn't that it vanished. It was slowly reshaped by an economy that stopped prioritizing wage growth and began prioritizing asset growth. The system still works, just not the way people were promised. And once you see how the incentives changed, it becomes very hard to believe the disappearance of the middle class was ever an accident.